Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Transcending Humanity. I'm Vanessa. I'm joined by Taryn and Jess this week. I wanted to do a little bit of a content warning ahead of this. We are going to be talking about Nex Benedict this week. And just for the content warning of, assault and honestly, murder, that we are going to be talking about, whether or not that murder was meant to be that way or not. And we're already demonetized here, so we can just talk about whatever we want. Um, so I wanted to just jump in, say this is our next Benedict episode. It's been on all of our minds. The news has just been absolutely devastating to the trans community. And Jess has a little bit of an update on Nex's pronouns. Jess, to start us off, would you mind going into that real quick?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, we just were discussing before we started recording. So it came out, really kind of came into more public social media discourse yesterday that Nex actually preferred he, him pronouns. And so I know like I have gotten used to thinking of Nex with the pronouns of they, them, as that was the beginning of how the reporting started about Nex, but we are going to do our best to respect that and use he, him. And I just want to acknowledge that that is why we're going off of the most current information that we have, even though there has been conflicting reports about that and a lot of details about Nex's life. We're trying to be as respectful as we can to Nex's memory. And so we will be using he, him.
Amazing. Yeah, because as we are starting to understand, it sounds like Next identified as trans male. So yeah, um, thank you, Jess, for bringing that up because that's something I hadn't heard yet. I know Taryn had kind of as well. So yeah, get into business really quick. Don't forget we have a Patreon, transcendinghumanity.com. There's all the links to it. We would love your support. We pour our heart and soul into this show, and the more support that we can have financially, the merrier, because it's money's good. So price of a coffee, less than a Starbucks caramel macchiato. Um, you can support,
Helps with
keep us
paying the
going.
bill.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, how are you two holding up through all this? It's been, Taryn, I know you've posted that it's kind of torn you up.
Yeah, I mean, I went through it was kind of like it was like various stages of grief, right?
Mhm.
So when I first read the news, it was over the weekend, this past weekend. Well, actually, wait, it wasn't this weekend, it was the previous weekend. But I decided to post about it on LinkedIn, right? It surprisingly went viral, right? And a lot of people weighed in on it. At that time that I was posting it, I felt a lot of anger, right?
Same.
And um, I can't speak for you two, and I would love to hear you chime in. But for me, as somebody who has literally been beaten in the school when I was in high school, I understood kind of Nexus mindset, right? When he went to the cops and he was being interviewed on that camera, and he was like, "Why even bother reporting it?" You feel like this helplessness, right, with the bullying. And even though this is creating a conversation, I think, in the country that is necessary, um, this is nothing new to anybody who's been in that LGBTQ2SIA plus community.
Mhm.
Like, this is our life, right? School for me felt like a prison because I felt like I kept getting beat up in the cell like all the time. So I stepped through that emotion, and then it just was kind of sorrow and helplessness, right? Because I feel like as an elder, right, in the community, and as somebody who's mixed indigenous, my brother is Cherokee, right? Same nation, that, next died in. And it just felt like, what is the point of doing what we do, right? When we can't even stop something as grotesque and as brutal as this was,
Mhm.
and I just, it still stays with me, right? I'm like, I still have that agitation, irritation, and anger that it's like, and I think the subsequent videos of some of these politicians have only worsened it.
They've been horrible.
And
Absolutely.
I would love to hear what the process that y'all went through, right? And how you felt on hearing the news, and did you have that flashback to your youth or any challenges you had?
Jess, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, hearing the news, it's interesting that Taryn, you mentioned kind of passing through different stages of emotion with this, because I think I did too. For sure. I came out in high school, and that was really hard. I didn't experience, I wasn't like beaten by peers. That wasn't my experience. I had like stuff thrown at me and yelled at me, and, I was bullied, not to the extent of that, that much physical, issues from school peers. I had other issues, but yeah, it definitely, took me back in that way. And there's been a lot of people online talking about how this has brought up a lot of trauma for them, and just that this has been traumatizing on so many levels. I think that it's interesting because I know that I have this, like, there's anger somewhere. I haven't really been able to access that anger, and like, anger is a hard one for me to access a lot of times. So I've been pretty stuck in sadness and grief, and really thinking a lot about what can I do? I have, fears around this as a parent who is going to support their child being whoever they are, very much in a red area, even though luckily the specific local area I'm in is really progressive, but the state is not. And I mean, another thing that I've been thinking of kind of in all of this is it's just kind of brought up, like, school just seems so dangerous now. I mean, like, school was dangerous when we went to school for people who are othered for different reasons. But like, the point of, like, the fears of mass shooting and the incitement to violence from the right, which is a lot of the kind of more systemic cultural through lines that really, unfortunately, like, supported this action being perpetuated by individuals. But it's like, you can't think about, if you always blame things on individuals, you're never seeing the picture of the system, right? And
Yeah.
so really kind of taking that away of, like, yes, this happened to one individual student by some other individual students, but this culture that we are in is so pervasive in hatred and divisiveness that it's so dangerous for kids like Nex just to go to school, just to, like, exist, and we know it's so dangerous for adults. And then it just, of course, just seems so much more sad to know that kids are having that experience, even just at the point that they're just trying to figure themselves out and just trying to, like, think about doing homework and shit, and, like, don't even have that, like, clarity to do that because they're trying to survive. So I've been thinking a lot about just, like, bullying in general, just the culture of bullying in our schools. Obviously there's a lot around that with all of everything that the right is pushing around that to support that culture. But, but thinking about, like, this is so terrible that this happened to Nex, obviously, but how many other kids are getting bullied, that hopefully will survive that bullying, but how, like, scarring is that to them? And what can we do about that, as elders in the community, as advocates and activists, like, what can we do to try to help students that are, especially those that are in areas like Oklahoma, where that culture is just so tough compared to, you know, a more progressive area like New York or California, where sure, that still happens there, I'm certain, but it's just a different level of the system. The systemic level is different in those places, you know? So yeah, I mean, I've been thinking all over the map with it, but and I mean, I think part of it is like I've just really had some moments of just like wanting this to all not be true, you know?
Yeah.
But really just coming back to like, this is what it is, and what are we gonna do now? You know?
It's, I mean, for my high school career was pretty uneventful. Because I didn't come out till I was 40. So, and honestly, my high school class is a pretty decent class. We all got along pretty well, but so I don't so much have that kind of trauma to look back at. But school nowadays it's a complete different animal than what it was when we were in school. And like, as you two have been saying, like you run the risk of being shot, you run the risk of being assaulted. And now we have bullying coming not just from peers, but also from the teachers. So it sounds like Owasso, did I pronounce that right? Owasso High School.
I think
Um,
so.
it sounds like it's a pretty toxic school in general, too. Because we know that I think last year a teacher resigned after being, verbally assaulted pretty much by libs of TikTok. And then there's another student, trans student, that had graduated that spoke out saying that, they had been bullied directly by adult staff at the school. So it's it's coming from them at all angles. And in states like Oklahoma, I can see this probably happening in Ohio and all over the place too. But like you have that one senator calling the queer community filth.
Yeah.
And it's the state superintendent is like, I saw a little bit of footage of him just talking in his car and just going on about how like being queer is wrong. And it's just this theocratic nightmare, and it's an absolute nightmare. And these kids just want to go to school. They just want to survive it and graduate and get out and move on with their lives. And as elders, we're here. We're supposed to be trying to be able to tell them it gets better. Fuck right now. If it doesn't get better right now, it's hard. The, the the best way to get through this is to find your community like we have here. For younger people listening, I hear Discord's a great place to go to build a community. And we have to stick together. So I mean, we are all of us very different people. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's this whole thing with Nex hit me really hard. I kind of see him as kind of like a little brother, or honestly, I'm old enough to be his mom. But like, there's been other murders and deaths in the trans community, but this one really seems to be resonating with people. I'm not trying to downplay the best of other people, but I think this resonates with people so much because it was in school. People that had been bullied before, like, and the escalation of it. When he was being interviewed by police in the hospital, he said that um, he was being tormented by these girls, which turned out to be, excuse me, younger than him. I believe they were freshmen. He didn't really know them that well. And he wound up pouring water on them. Um, and that instigated that's what I don't want to say that
Yeah.
instigated that's what their response was. The punishment did not fit the crime.
Well, let me like, can we just go back for a sec?
Yeah.
Right. So when they were mocking Nex and a friend, bullying Next and a friend, Nex's response was to throw some water on him, right?
Mhm.
Their response was to beat Next to the ground and smash their head into the floor.
Yeah.
Like that's and I'm sorry to jump in on what you were saying, but it was like that's to me like the most insane part. When I saw some of these like the articles start saying that Next threw water on them, right? I was like, listen, a death penalty is never the solution to getting water. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, the crime was so severe. Like, what those girls did was so severe. And like I said, very triggering. I mean, for people like me that were on a locker room floor with three boys beating my makeup wearing, nail polish wearing, but on the floor of a locker room, this was incredibly triggering. I was crawled up in a little fetal position, and I could only imagine what Nex was going through as they were slamming his head into the floor. And I mean, that's like part of that's part of the rage, right?
Mhm.
Was like I couldn't defend myself. Next had people, I think there people in the room, in the bathroom with them. And it's just, I feel like it's so heinous. And Vanessa, to your point, right? It's activating people like it's never done before.
Mhm.
We've seen these murders before, right? And um, they are grotesque and they are horrible and they are brutal. But this just is resonating with people because of that. And I just feel like the severity of it and just happening in school, like things are starting to piece together in some people's brains.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think, sorry, I didn't cut you off there, but I was just going to say that I think the other piece, in addition to this happening in school and that kind of being like, okay, well, that's new. Like, that's not, I mean, because unfortunately, like, the trans community is not, unfamiliar with murders happening, but it happening in school, but specifically it being is easier to see the links with this situation and the policies. It's easier to see the links to the anti-trans bathroom policies. It's easier to see the links to the school pushing out a queer teacher or a teacher that is, pro queer, and bringing in, what's her name?
Shia Rich.
Yeah,
Who shall
the
not be
libs of
named?
TikTok person. I don't even want to say her name, but
Yeah.
whatever. And like all of that, I think it's just a lot more direct in this situation. And something that so many people in the community have been calling out with these policies, saying, these policies can cause something like, oh, like this actually is what this can cause. Like, and being able to, it's just a lot easier to connect the dots with this. In addition to the fact that school is supposed to be a safe place, right?
Sure
And
isn't.
that the administration and the teachers and the adults around are supposed to be the responsible parties to keep children safe. That's the whole point. But yeah, just like even outside of that, just that whole culture of, that, the anti-woke movement, and like this is a direct result of that, like, hatred happening.
Yeah, definitely.
Cause and effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Looks like Zach just joined us. Um,
Hi.
hey Zach.
Hey.
So yeah, it's the adults in this situation have failed on so many levels. Knowing that he identified as a trans male really makes the bathroom thing really make a lot more sense too. My dog is dreaming over there.
Just to be clear, who are we talking about?
Nex Benedict.
Oh, if I could just say something on that. So I I'm with the Four Freedoms Democratic Club in New York, and I was talking to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging panel that meets every couple of weeks, and we were going over things that we can do to prevent bullying in schools, because that's how this happened. Um, Even though he was on his deathbed and they were going to press charges because he dumped water on them. But what my idea is to kind of have a panel where people from the LGBTQIA plus community can share their stories about, what it's like to be in their bodies. And it wouldn't just be members of that community, it would be members from organizations that support that community. And we would exchange ideas about how we can work together to do something substantive to have an impact on reducing, if not outright ending, bullying against uh, transgender and non-binary youth. And while there is no date in place yet, I was wondering this if this discussion is something any of you would be interested in joining in.
Um, yeah, yeah, I would say so.
Okay, I can provide details, but I just wanted to, because I'm actually on my way to another appointment, but I just wanted to come on and kind of see where you were or what you thought of doing a panel like this, because the thing that we need to understand is it's going to take a lot of education
Yeah, definitely.
about that community and a lot of self-reflection to really do something substantive so this never happens again. Because it was Nex, but it could be any one of them, especially with all the anti-trans and anti non-binary legislation out there.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but really, thank you for having this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for popping in and
Hmm. Hmm.
sharing that. We are, it's, I was talking about just the failure of the adults that we've had, like from the school. I mean, the resource officer didn't do anything, and no ambulance was called. And
They're
eventually,
for dumping water on these bullies' heads. Like, really?
yeah,
They would
yeah,
die. You're gonna press charges? Come on.
yeah, when Nex was in the hospital, the police were
Yeah.
telling him that he was just as culpable as the girls that beat him up because,
Oh,
it, but yeah, the escalation, as
yeah.
Terrence said, the escalation was
Right.
just mind-boggling. So,
I'm sorry,
um,
but I have to go. But
okay,
I'll provide details when I can.
okay, thanks, Zach.
Thanks,
Yep,
Zach.
of course.
Yeah, surprise, Zach. Just boop. Um, the it, I was talking earlier about how he identified as a trans male. That makes this bathroom thing make a whole lot more sense too um than on the non-binary level. And you can see, you can kind of just hear what it was like in the bathroom. Those girls are like, "What are you doing here? You're a boy," or whatever. Or "You'll never be man enough, you'll never be woman enough," whatever they were saying. It had to be just absolutely cruel. Um, but I mean, that mentality that these kids have, that's not that's learned. That comes down from their parents. And hatred is just, it goes on through generations. And as Zach was saying, we have to find a way to stop it. One of the biggest, what is she doing? My dog is over there like grunting in her sleep. One of the biggest things that we can do is get these Republicans out of office in order to actually start creating change, because it's like a rot that's festering, from the government to the people, and we have to stop it. So, having allies, I'm going to share an ally video here in a little bit, but having allies is very important. Um, and I think this case also can be confusing for allies too, because Nex has been identified as non-binary, and I know a lot of people just don't. The entire idea of non-binary just breaks a lot of people's brains. So, um, because we're so programmed on a binary genders, that it's not that way. So,
I mean, for socialization since birth of a
mhm,
cishet binary. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Been fed that crap for years and decades. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And now they can't think past that. Now, I think to Zach's point, right? You know, I don't have a lot of hope on stopping bullying. This has been going on forever.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can share stories with you of how I got the beatings in school, right? For being a GNC makeup wearing, you know, assigned male at birth person. Okay.
Mhm.
So and that was in the 80s. So flash
Yeah.
forward, that's right. It's always been happening. It will continue to happen. I think Jess hit on an amazing, on just spot on the point of the intersection between that cause and effect, right? In Oklahoma, they are still trying to pass 49 anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ plus laws, 49 of them, right? This school district has been problematic, you know, and I think just to your point, exactly, people are starting to connect the dots. Like, oh, if we do this, then this happens. You know, it's a shame that somebody has to be brutally assaulted and die from those injuries for somebody to connect the dots.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I'm going to soapbox for a second, but like, you know, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a couple different things pop up, right? A clump of cells is a child, and yet a trans non-binary child is not as filth.
Mhm.
Okay. That is what one major political party in this country is selling.
Mhm.
A clump of cells with no consciousness is a child, but an actual child is filth. And I want that to set in with every person listening to this pod, every ally. Okay. You know, we had the IVF ruling, which is ridiculous. We had this from Nex, which came directly from these Oklahoma legislators and school district people and superintendents. I mean, all of this is connected in this weird ass, pardon the French, crappy theocracy that one party is trying to put into place, right? And it's getting tiring to remind people that we belong and we exist
Mhm.
and we are not filth, right? We are human beings and we should be treated with the basic respect and dignity of a human being. You know, I also saw something encouraging. So it was the first murder conviction of a trans woman. So the federal, I think it was a federal jury or judge courthouse convicted a man of, you know, killing a trans woman because after he had relations with her, you know, people insulted him and he got really mad and butthurt. So decided to take it out and kill somebody for that. So, you know, and that was in South Carolina, I believe. So, you know, while we have the red states, there's a mix, right? Next murdered in Oklahoma, a trans woman gets some sort of justice in a federal courthouse in South Carolina,
Yeah.
you know, and there is so much further that we have to go, you know, and I just feel like, Jess, I'm glad people are connecting the dots, right?
Mhm.
Because it's about damn time.
It really is. It really
No
is.
more stolen children, no more stolen siblings.
Mhm.
Like people need to stand up and wake up because when they're coming for IVF or abortion, right? This is all connected, people. Like I just
Mhm.
feel like I don't know how I can scream that. I feel like I got to be in the corner of like some, you know, major intersection in California and be like, it's all connected, holding a giant ass sign up. It's, I mean, it's nothing is coincidence, nothing is happenstance.
No,
This is play, this is the plan.
it's it's very organized plan. It's terrifying. And you're right. It is all connected. And they're attacking from all fronts. They have to be stopped. And the only way to stop them is to remove them from office. But it's it's hard to get through to people to say this. It's not just the trans community under attack. It's huge swaths of the population. Anybody with a uterus that has any plans of having a kid or that's raped or anything. All this stuff is just it's such an absolute mess that yeah, as Taryn, as you said, like they consider an embryo a person, but a trans kid filth. I mean, George Carlin is one of my favorite comedians, and he had his bit about how conservatives only care about the unborn, and once you're born, you're on your own, you're fucked, and it's true. You know, they don't care because Alabama also I believe they took away school lunch programs. So they want these kids born, but then they don't want anything to do with them. They don't want any support. If you people
Sorry,
that
go
want
ahead.
to, what's that?
No, I was going to say something, but go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to give a quick plug for people that want to follow the news. The investigation is ongoing, and initially the police said that the death wasn't related to trauma, and they're backpedaling on that, but they were working off the initial medical examiner report. And there's a bunch of different causes of death, and the trauma is just the medical term. But if if you look up I keep on saying under the table, under the desk news, they are covering this very, very closely. They have a very close eye on everything. They have multiple videos, kind of explaining what's going on, and they go into much better detail than I ever possibly could. So they are the ones to check out under the desk news. Um, I think they're most active on Instagram and TikTok. But that's where I'm finding out most of my news on this, and it's all ongoing. From what I understand, the police have a lot of things on the table. They do have murder charges on the table. They have hate crimes on the table. So it's good to hear that that's happening. But had this not gained this national attention, it very well could have been swept under the rug. So, because this happened back on February 8th, and no one knew about it for 2 weeks. So, so it's scary. What were you gonna say, Taryn?
No, I was just going to say the commonality between all of this, right, is something the three of us have the privilege to enjoy, which is bodily autonomy.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We can seek the health care that we need, right, to live the lives that we want to live our lives, right? And the common thread for all of this is it's control over others, it's bodily autonomy. In every case, you're seeing this, right? You're
It is.
protecting nobody with these laws. You're
Mhm.
protecting your power, your privilege, and your hegemony, right? And that's it. That's
I
all I
almost
wanted.
I almost want to tell them, like, leave our bodily autonomy alone. You can go without wearing a mask, if that's what it takes. Because they're so backwards.
Well, then they're gonna say my body, my choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, fuck me. So, um, Jess,
I
do you
think
have
it's
any?
my choice for me and not for thee. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
J-
no, I mean, I totally agree. Bodily autonomy. I just also want to hit on like kind of more macro level. I think it's like a push towards, Christofascism, right? Which, it could get into a whole rabbit hole about like moving towards like eugenics, and like that's part of, the desire for eradicating trans people, and trying to control reproductive rights, and all of that. But I just think that it's what also just really is so irritating to me, kind of on a more general level, just so consistently, is that we have so many problems as a world and as a country and in our own communities, that really do need to be addressed, that are just not addressed because the Conservative Party is so focused on trying to restrict bodily autonomy, and trying to restrict more open education, and trying to erase identities that are not white, and all of that, and instead of focusing on all of the problems that we have that are so real, of climate change, housing crisis, the cost of inflation, like all of these things that like we could really use help on, that would like, that's really what I want politicians to be working on, solutions for, like food insecurity, like all of that are things that, that's really what I want politicians to be working on. And I hope, although, we'll see with this election, it seems like so far the politics around bigotry are really kind of a losing battle.
They are.
I mean, the thing that sucks is that when people are in power, they're going to legislate their asses off to like do everything they can, which is what we've seen, this incredibly high number of bills that are anti-trans and, you know, even anti-queer a little bit more broadly, and anti-reproductive rights and all of that. But I think that it does seem like, and, you know, I certainly hope that it is true that like, that this party is failing and it is falling apart, and that, you know, if we do as much as we can to get them out of power, and not just on the national level, but all the way down to the local level, and 100% like all the way down to the school boards, you know, like
Those are
this
some of the
guy,
most
Ryan
important
Walters,
elections.
like he needs to be off the
Yeah.
frickin', he needs to be out of the school system. Like there's no reason. And I don't even understand how people like can be a part of a school system if they're not, if they don't live there, you know, certainly I don't know anything about the rule making around that, but like, in my opinion, it's like, if you're not a parent or a teacher, or at the bare minimum, a resident, like you should not be involved in that school
No.
system. And really, I don't even think a resident should be involved. I think it should be like parents and teachers, or people who at least were parents or were teachers, you
Someone
know?
has skin in the game.
Yeah, you know, because otherwise, what are you doing? Why are you trying to control this? But so I think that like I think that kind of on a bigger level is a thing. And I do want to just kind of acknowledge too, I was, you know, doing a little bit of looking stuff up last night on the situation with Nex, and trying to just make sure I was as up to date as possible. And I want to give people a little bit of hope around people who really want to take some action. So I want to mention, Taryn mentioned a little bit, but like it, you know, Nex was a part of Indigenous community. There's been a little bit of a conflicting reports around that. That's why I'm kind of saying this slightly hesitantly, because there's been some conflicts of, was he Cherokee? Was he Choctaw? There's been a little bit of, there's just been conflicting reports around that. And like, we don't know. That I did find a really cool organization though, that is very involved with, the tribal nations in Oklahoma and the 2S LGBTQIA community. That organization is called Freedom Oklahoma. Which when I first came across it on Google, I was like, freedom, like, just because that's like such a conservative, like rallying word.
Yeah.
But it is a very progressive organization, and they're really specifically have a vision of working with all the different, it's like there's 39 different sovereign tribal nations in Oklahoma. And, you know, advocating for them, and especially for any individuals who are two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. So if anybody wants to, you know, find a way to support, that organization seems like a really good one to support financially if you have the means to do so. That organization is also in the wake of Nex's tragic death been offering some support groups for people. I think some of them have even been virtual, but it does seem like they actually have a 501c3 and a 501c4. So they have a political arm and just a nonprofit arm. And they specifically talk about on the website that they do not take like big funding. They don't have like funders. And one of the reasons for that is so that they can stay independent and stay really true to their values.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that for people who are looking for any little hint of positivity in any of this, or a place to direct their energy. And I just want to mention too, like we were talking earlier about, you know, what this brings up for us about our past. And when I came out in high school, it was really tough. One of the things that got me through it was finding a local organization for LGBTQ youth that was supportive, where I could go to support groups and find people in the community, and also people like adults who were volunteering, who were helping mentor LGBTQIA youth. And I just want to like just support any youth who might possibly come across this. You know, there's definitely resources online. The It Gets Better Project is a good thing to check out. There are some good resources through there. There's some apps if somebody is in an area where they cannot find a local organization. They don't feel like it's safe to go to a local organization. You know, I totally understand some people may be in that situation, but if you are in around a local organization, you can do some research or feel like you have enough support to go to a local organization in person. It can really help you get through this, as far as, you know, like kind of going back to addressing like the people who are still being bullied day to day. I just want to encourage that, because if you have the access to that, it was something that really, really helped me a ton. And the itgetsbetter.org has resources to like lists of local organizations too. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
thanks. Yeah, I think yeah, I saw initial reports, right, where that Nex was Cherokee Choctaw. So to me, I look to the family or to the tribe. Oh, this occurred on Cherokee land. Okay, this is Cherokee Nation land that Owasso is on. So for me, I was encouraged by seeing the principal chief come out with a statement from the Cherokee Nation. I also think, and part of this comes back from what happened with Zoe Zephyr up, I think it's the Montana.
Mm.
You know, I was talking to an indigenous politician up there, and I was like, we need the tribes to weigh in, right? We need the tribes. Like, there is history of our people. And when I say our people, I'm talking about the three of us, right? Like, there is history of us on this continent. We need that security and safety of the tribes. They are independent nations within this country and are treated as such. So sovereign nation, wow, that kind of made me jump a little bit. So I'll take that your dog agreed with me. So but yeah, this occurred on Cherokee land. I want to know exactly what the tribe is planning on doing, right? I want to know how it works to have a public school on native land, right? And what those connections are. Like, I want people to dive down deeper in this so we can figure out some stuff. Because I think, like, for us, I think the tribes are somewhere that we can actually have some support, right? And like I said, the statement from the principal chief was encouraging, but I kind of want a little bit more, right? You know, and I think that's important. You know, like for me, when I belong to a tribal community back east, led by two spirits, right? So it's like I chose that tribal community because of that,
Mhm.
because I knew what my journey was heading, right? And it's important. I also want to add one thing, Jess, to like when we talk about with Nex, right? So Nex was friends identified as trans and masculine. Not every indigenous person is two spirit. I refer to myself as two spirit because I blended both male and female spirits together into something different. And I'm comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with that label, but no one should ever assign an indigenous queer person the label of two spirits without talking to them first, right? And to
That's,
understand their journey and their walk.
100%.
yeah. Yeah, and we're here where Cherokee blood has been spilled on Cherokee land in a building stolen from Cherokee's land by colonizers. And I don't know I don't know anything about the girls that assaulted him, but I don't know. Um, to get to circle back onto the politics part, I do have a feeling that Democrats are going to do pretty well in 2024. Um, I saw a stat from the Ohio Democratic Party that 18-year-olds have registered 35% more 18-year-olds have registered to vote in Ohio than any other than the past. So people are getting they're passionate about it. But what if the Democrats win? We have to hold their feet to the fire to actually get them to do something, because that's the problem that we have is why hasn't the Equality Act passed? You know, they had so much time to do it. They need to actually get the stuff done and solidify and protect rights for everybody, you know, codify Roe into law rather than all that stuff to just kind of keep it going. Since we're starting to run short on time, I do want to bring up allies here. We in the trans community have found a very powerful ally in a guy named Sean Cummings in Oklahoma. He's the vice mayor of a place called The Village, which is like on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, I believe. And he owns an Irish bar there, but he's been very vocal against these horrible school boards and horrible rulings. And I know he's been attacked by the Libs of TikTok person. And speaking of her, I would talk about an unassuming person. She just looks like another mom. And that's even more terrifying to me than anything. That usually when you think of a zealot of hate and stuff like that, you think of, your brain just thinks of someone like Trump, you know. And what's terrifying is she blends in. So we have to watch out for that. I want to share this. It's about 3.5 minutes long, from Sean. This is a very powerful message. This right here is a perfect example of how to be an amazing ally. So I'm going to go ahead and play it.
So are you doing this? I'm just going to add that that person who runs Loops of TikTok has an enormous platform and is making outrageous amounts of changes in a very negative way. I don't know if you all saw the video of her getting interviewed by a reporter in LA. I think it was in LA.
Yeah, I know that's been like really a pretty hot topic in the last week as well. And I've seen clips of it. I have not watched the entire thing. But I have seen clips of it. And yeah, I kind of have a both and perspective on it, honestly, but I'm curious to know what you think.
So my view is this, right? Like, I think it's important that Chaya speak, because I found for me, what was most illuminating was, number one, conservatives can never handle a follow-up question. And number two, she sounded like an idiot, right? She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's trafficking and selling fear and selling this lie. And then when called on it, she folds like a cheap ass suit. So I looked at it like, yeah, I can understand where people are like, I can't believe you gave her a platform. I'm like, no, please show people how stupid she is.
Yeah.
Please show people how short-sighted she is, how ignorant she is, right? She started a TikTok probably because she sucks at real estate. I don't know, just like her number one guy. So I'm just sorry, I'm a little bitter on this one, but that's kind of how I felt. Jess, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt like this is understandable that it is very traumatizing to trans people, you know, specifically, or LGBTQ plus people, but like, you know, specifically people in the trans community. And like, I kind of have to say, like that wasn't for us, you know, and it wasn't for her staunch supporters either. I see that as that this is something for the people in the middle. This is something for the people that don't know anything about her. This is something for the people who may be curious and maybe pretty uninformed. So I saw it as like good to get it out there, and also important for our community to understand that we still need to have our own boundaries around it for our own mental health, you know? And like, we don't have to like it, but I didn't see it as something that really helps her promotion at all, you know, because I do think that, you know, hey, even if her staunch supporters really liked it, like, who cares? They weren't going to be swayed anyway, you know? So I really see it as that it could be good for the people in the middle, for the people that don't have a lot of information, that aren't very invested, who are kind of coming into this going, who is this person? You know, what are they like? What are they about? And really kind of, poking at that. It does seem to be that, that it was pretty apparent that, that there's no there, you know, that she's got nothing beyond, just platforming hatred. And that there's really nothing behind it. And it was interesting because the couple clips that I saw, I remember her saying something about like, well, I don't like lies. But then there was like another clip where she was saying, well, is it illegal to lie? You know, and it's like, it doesn't even, okay. You know, it's like, I mean, and you know, even that argument is silly because it's like, okay, you know, you don't like lies. I mean, that's just like saying you don't agree with anything anybody does, you could consider it a lie. I mean, you could consider somebody's religion a lie. You could consider, I mean, there's so many different angles where it's like, okay, whatever. And, you know, like that doesn't mean that you then need to destroy people's life. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that like, I certainly don't hope she causes more havoc, but I think she will. I kind of hope that her history goes the way of like Alex Jones, you know, in the sense that, you know, that somebody takes her to task and, you know, sues her for defamation or whatever in a way, whatever needs to happen to get her to stop, because she's just actively harming the community. And I don't know why. I don't know what it is that like people just get like into whatever the ego like power thing is that like trips up, and then they just like fall down this hole of like just continuing to go into like infinity around hating some group that like doesn't seem like did anything to them ever, you know? And so I don't get it. But no, I actually thought that, I mean, I thought that the interview from what I saw of it was good in that sense. I just also think that like the trans community is just so sensitive right now.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely are.
Yeah, I mean, no, I totally respect that. Right? Like everybody's got to look at this from their own unique perspective, right? Like for me, you know, I've kind of dialed back on some of the next stuff, right, over the last couple of days because it was just, it gets too real, right? It gets too close to some of the experiences I've had. And it's just like, so I totally understand protecting that piece. But I think you're right. I mean, from the middle, that's what I liked about it, right? Was like, I don't like seeing anybody who's just a plain old hater, like get any kind of platform. But the way that she was just dismantled in her logic, right? In her lack of facts, her lack of knowledge. I want that to resonate. I want that to be there for all time. And yes, I do want to see her sued into oblivion, like the rest of these hate mongers, right? And then they'll all be in like maybe they can shack up in the same apartment with Giuliani, you know, after he pays his stuff out. Jess, I'm super political in case you didn't know.
I didn't know that. No.
Not at all. There we go. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. I was trying to get the screen share to record so they could hear it, but I don't, for some reason they couldn't, and whatever. So I'm going to plug that in right now.
Thank you all very much. Before I start, we spoke last month, and your Chaya Rychek tweeted my deal out before I left. I had a death threat, city council threats, everything else. Real nice, but that's the person on the library board now. As we expected to have happen, because it's happened 20 times when she talks. Now, I want to look at the Owasso situation here, and I don't want to sit here and say I'm the Nostradamus of everything because none of it's funny. I would open up with a joke, usually, because I pegged this so correctly. You, and your rhetoric, and your inability to do anything as a board here, are partially responsible for emboldening bullies to jump a girl in the bathroom. 3 older girls don't just jump a 16-year-old in the bathroom for no apparent reason, especially when they're of the alphabet community, who you personally have attacked ever since you ran for office, and you brought in the chief attacker of this, Chaya Rychek. Okay? It's on you. You remember when I said the blood's on you guys and everything? I think what you're looking at now is a federal lawsuit for each one of you personally, and I hope it happens because it'll bankrupt you. And I hope it happens for you, Ryan, because you're money-oriented. I hope it bankrupts you as well. There is legal culpability here. No Title IX was followed. Teacher didn't turn it in. Principal didn't turn it in. Is it mandatory reporting? Is that what it's called? Mandatory? Give me a nod. If you're on the school board, you should know. Is it mandatory reporting for somebody to report a hate crime? Is it mandatory? Did I not tell you this was going to happen? Yet here I am again, and I'm sure when I leave, your Chaya Rychek chick will tweet my stuff out again, and I'll get more death threats. That's who you brought into the room. You emboldened these 3 girls yourself. Chaya Rychek emboldened these 3 girls by being on the library board. It's already difficult to be in high school. It's very difficult to be different. But when somebody is attacked for being different, this isn't even about the death part, because that's coming next. And we'll see who gets charged and how many families lose their children to prison. You are liable. You. So what are you going to do about it down the line? Literally, what are you going to do to change your behavior? It was real nice that you said thoughts and prayers for everybody at the beginning. You brought it on. Did Chaya Rychek do something in that school against an alphabet-friendly teacher? And she ended up getting so many threats she quit? Yet you still brought her on, and within a month, magically, something happened. You have no deniability here. It is a pattern. Forrest Gump could see this pattern. You don't deserve that. You have actual blood on your hands. No matter how sincere you probably practiced it in the mirror to look sincere today. Look, you and worthless ass Chaya Rychek. Literally blood on your hands, and everybody that still sits at this table shouldn't have shown up today and done some kind of a protest to show you're not okay with this. Get a backbone. Literally, it's embarrassing. I am humiliated and embarrassed for every one of you that showed up today. Shame on you, man. And as I told you, sooner or later, you're going to get a parent who comes after you and yours. That's the way this works. Keep it up.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we have Mike Howard.
Okay, we're back. So Sean, I actually reached out to him and asked him for if he had a statement.
I was hoping you were going to read this.
Yeah. So I'm gonna read what he said. He gave me his cell phone number, and he said he would like to be on the show. He just wasn't able to join us today because of some personal stuff that he had. But he said the libs of TikTok threats and everything forced me to lower my social profile for a bit. The single most important thing I would tell anybody in the alphabet community is that they have to vote. It seems so simple, but in Oklahoma, we have a terribly low voter turnout. Everyone needs allies. You don't have to agree on everything, but you need to have allies in the trenches to get candidates in that aren't insane. It seems so simple to people to be kind, but that isn't where the money is these days. And let me know if there's anything else I can do for you. So that was a statement from Sean on that. His main thing is he's begging Oklahomans to get out and vote. Your vote does matter. It's you may not always like who you're voting for, but it's the alternatives that we have. It's just deadly for too many people. And not voting is just giving the other side more power because they show up. We need people that are progressive to get out and do it.
Yeah.
And I know it can feel like your vote doesn't matter, but it does. And the only reason it feels like it doesn't matter is because propaganda has told you that, and that propaganda is false. What was the last presidential election was in the end determined by something like 45,000 votes, even though there's like an 8 million vote difference. But when it came down to like the electoral college, it was very, very tight. And we see that over and over and over again. We have to get these people out. So, Sean, if you're listening, thank you so much for being an ally. I encourage people to follow him. His he's on Instagram and TikTok, most active on TikTok, but Sean is spelled Sean. So Sean _ Cummings _ Irish _ pub. And we need more people like Sean in office. So because we need people to actually do something. I said it before the clip, but we have to hold Democrats' feet to the fire to actually get them to do something if they get in office. We can't let them just slack like they've done before. We have to call them out on that kind of stuff because they are also getting, a lot of them are getting paid off by donors as well. So if you're elected by the people to be a representative of the people, you need to represent the people and not your corporate sponsors. This country is being torn into a horrible mix of a theocracy and a corporate, like I can't even remember the word for it, but we are owned by our corporate overlords. Like right now, we're going through this thing with Wendy's, where they are want to do surge pricing for their items, and as if it's not already so expensive. Like around me, a spicy chicken sandwich is almost $7. And how much more money do they need? I mean, they're already making tons of income. You know, Dave Thomas and Lynn MK are probably just rolling in their graves at all this. But it's stuff like that you see happening. People can't afford to live. We have to push back against that. Um, and we are certainly not going to have any pushback against that while Republicans are in office. So,
Yeah, I
America's
agree.
one. I'm sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
Oh, so we're both like, I'm sorry. No, agreed. If you don't vote, like, I know there's been a lot of conversation recently about protest voting, protest unvoting, withholding a vote out of protest. You know, that gets into a whole nother topic that we certainly don't have time for today, but like, I get it that like, I am not happy with everything that this administration has done. I am not happy with their foreign policy. I am not happy with many things, but not voting for the Progressive Party right now will not help any of those causes. It will not help any people affected by any of those issues. And, you know, there was, I don't know if I can articulate this super well, but I'll try. Like there was something I saw that someone said that it's like, you have to imagine that you're on a bus, right? We're not on a race car to an end here, you know? So like if the next stop is 4 more years of Biden, you know, assuming his health holds, like let's hope it does, you know, that that may not be your goal. That may not be, you know, he may not be like the ideal politician for you. He's not for me, but I certainly think that it helps. It does not help me or anyone I care about, or anyone that, you know, anyone that I care about that I know, or anyone that I care about that I don't know, by withholding my vote from the Democratic Party. And yes, I totally agreed, Vanessa, that yes, we need to vote them in, and then we need to hold them to it, and then we need to push them to change these things about the party that we want to see changed. But you know, not participating at some point is kind of a point of, it's maybe a false sense of like privilege. It's not anything that I can afford right now.
No, at this point, like people that don't want to vote because they don't like either party, yeah, there's downsides to both, but there's a much bigger downside to voting Republican. If the Republicans win again in 2024, we're honestly facing, between looking at Project 2025, Trump's Agenda 47, we're honestly looking at this could be the last time in America that people can vote. That's where we are right now. Or at least that their votes matter.
Well, as they said at CPAC, you know, welcome to the end of democracy.
Yes, exactly. And that was very telling. They are no longer hiding anything. They're saying all the right parts out loud. And we need to fucking believe them because it's scary. You have to get out there. I understand the withholding vote thing. We should not be supporting Israel. We should be keeping that money and spending it on Americans. Like what they said, I keep hearing a number of something like $12 billion would solve homelessness in America. So let's do that. But yeah, again, that's a conversation for a whole other time. But free Palestine. So
I
I
want
know
to
we
just,
are. What?
can I add a couple things real quick?
Yeah.
So just with the protest vote, right? So we saw this in Michigan. Right? The protest vote that's happening in the primary right now should happen, right? This should be nudging him into a more leftist mindset against an ongoing genocide against an indigenous population, right? So I totally support that. If you're going to withhold your vote in the general election, I will not engage with your content. I will not share your content. I will not promote your content because our rights and our lives are at stake. When we talk about it, also, we need to understand the privilege of telling people to go out and vote, right? Because as we have just kind of highlighted on Oklahoma, in many red states, there is disenfranchisement of Black and brown Americans across the country. When we talk about like Oklahoma, I need to do some research on what laws they've passed to prevent people from sovereign nations, tribal nations, from voting. I know that Nome had passed some things that made it incredibly difficult for Indigenous First Nation people to vote in a general election, right? They do these small little changes, right? Knowing how certain people live. They do a small change where you have to have a physical street address. Well, nobody has that up in South Dakota, out there on the reservation, right? So
Yeah.
prevents and suppresses that vote. So while we can sit here privileged, right, to say please vote, don't stand by, get in there and fight. We have to also acknowledge too that there are so many millions of people disenfranchised every year in this country.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to add, Vanessa, to what you had said earlier. America is one of those rare countries where you can have $30,000 in your checking account, become a senator, and in 5 or 6 years have about 10, 15, 20 million. So that's not how it is for me. I know that ain't how it is for you. And yes, I'm guessing it's not how it is for you either. So, I think for us, get the money out of fucking politics, please.
Yes.
Stop this dark money. Stop these political action committees who are just, their sole existence is to suppress us,
Mhm.
right? Their sole existence is to get rid of us. Like, we've got to change politics, and I'm not going to tolerate it. When the Democrats have a landslide, if it's a giant blue tsunami, I am not going to stay silent. I'm going to be pushing to get rid of the Electoral College, to take out that dark money from nefarious forces and to expand the goddamn Supreme Court, for God's sakes.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of shit that I'm going to be pushing. Sorry, I'm a little profane on this episode because I'm a little salty as
This episode is rated explicit. You can say whatever you want.
yeah,
So
so I'm a little salty as fuck. So those are some of the things that I believe. So kind of think we're all on the same page. So we just got to fight like hell, make this happen. I've been this past couple of weeks, I've been thinking more and more about my exit plan. And my exit plan is, what country or state can I move to where I can take my money out of this country and live in relative safety? Like, that's where I'm at right now.
I'm
Like
there
that,
too. And it's one reason I'm so desperate to find a job, because I'm broke. I can't afford to go anywhere, and it's terrifying. So
there's a whole bunch of people like that. We're in tough straits, right? And we got to fight through and just, got to put everything we have into it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jess, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to thank you, Taryn, for bringing that up as far as the disenfranchisement of voters, because you are 100% right. I know a little bit more about it from the criminal justice angle than Indigenous populations. So, but I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it is absolutely true. Specifically again for like people of color in this country. And again, that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah, you're totally right. So I agree. It is a privilege. I think if you have that privilege, especially in the general election, please use it.
We have to check our privilege.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for saying that.
Well, thank you both of us, or for both of us. Thank you both of you for being on this week. I need to wrap up because I'm about to pee my pants, but
Okay.
yeah. So thank you everyone for listening. His name was Nex Benedict. His name. And please support the show and just support your local queer community. Reach out when people struggle. Trevor Project said that their calls went up like 300% after the news of Nex broke, which means it means it's resonating with a lot of people. So, but we will see you next time. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Bye, y'all.